Today is Good Friday. As you all know, today is the day that Jesus is crucified. But let me explain all that Jesus went through before he died on the cross. His day begins at 4 a.m. He appears before Annas and Caiaphas for a trial. They were both high priests at that time. Then at 6 a.m., Jesus again stands trial before Pontius Pilate and Herod. Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor of Judea at that time, and Herod was a ruler of Galilee. It is at this time Pilate sentenced Jesus to be crucified. At 8 a.m., Jesus carries his cross to Golgotha. Because Jesus is too physically weak from being beaten and scourged, a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, was forced to carry his cross instead. At 9 a.m., Jesus is crucified. Soon, the soldiers divide his clothes. Then the soldiers and other people mock Jesus. He can't save himself. Come down from there, Son of God. At 11 a.m., Jesus speaks to the thieves on both sides of the cross. The repentant thief asks Jesus to remember him, and Jesus answers, "Today you will be with me in paradise." And to his mother Mary and to John his disciple, Jesus says, "Woman, here is your son. John, here is your mother." At noon, a 3-hour darkness descends upon the land. When the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. From noon to 3 p.m., the earth quakes. The temple curtain is torn, and Jesus thirsts. Then at 3 p.m., after 6 excruciating hours, Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus said, "It is finished," and he gave up his spirit. He died. This is what Jesus went through on this Good Friday. We want to consider, why did Christ die? In John Stott's book, The Cross of Christ, there's a fascinating chapter that answers this very question. Why did Christ die? What I will talk about from here on is from the 2nd chapter of Stott's book. First, Stott says the Roman soldiers and Pilate killed Jesus. It was the Roman soldiers who did the actual crucifying. In particular, Pilate, who was the Roman governor of the province, handed Jesus to be crucified. Though Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent, he succumbed to the fear of the Jewish crowd to hand over the innocent person. In essence, Pilate handed over Jesus because of his ambition and cowardice. He was fearful that a rowdy crowd would affect his position. Second, Stott considers Jewish people and their priests who killed Jesus. They felt threatened by Jesus. I quote Stott, "He undermined their prestige, their hold over their people, their own self-confidence and self-respect while leaving his intact. They were envious of him and therefore determined to get rid of him." End of quote. Third, Stott points out that Judas Iscariot killed Jesus. He handed Jesus over to the priest for 30 pieces of silver. Jesus taught that it was impossible to serve both God and money, while Judas chose money. Fourth, Stott points out that it was not only their sins, meaning Pilate, Jewish leaders, and Judas, but it was also our sins that killed Jesus. Let me quote Stott again because he says it much more beautifully than I could ever say. If we were in their place, Pilate, Jewish leaders, and Judas, we would have done what they did. Indeed, we have done it. For whenever we turn away from Christ, we are crucifying the Son of God all over again and subjecting him to public disgrace. We too sacrifice Jesus to our greed, like Judas, to our envy, like the priests, and to our ambition like Pilate. Stott continues, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" the old Negro spiritual asks. And we must answer, yes, we were there, not as spectators only, but as participants, guilty participants, plotting, scheming, betraying, bargaining, and handing him over to be crucified. Here's an important point from Stott. Before we can begin to see the cross as something done for us, we have to see it as something done by us. Only the man who is prepared to own his share in the guilt of the cross, wrote Canon Peter Green, may acclaim his share in its grace. Our sins, my sins, put Jesus on the cross. But Stott does not end there, however. Though Jesus was brought to his death by human sins, says Stott, he did not die as a martyr. On the contrary, he went to the cross voluntarily and even deliberately. Octavius Winslow sums it up like this: who delivered up Jesus to die? Not Judas for money, not Pilate for fear, not the Jews for envy, but the Father for love. I quote Stott. On the human level, Judas gave him up to the priests, who gave him up to Pilate, who gave him up to the soldiers who crucified him. But on the divine level, the Father gave him up, and he gave himself up to die for us. Stott says, as we face the cross, as we look at the cross and remember the cross on this Good Friday, we can say to ourselves both, I did it. My sin sent him there, and he did it. His love took him there. And therefore, let us remember our great sins, which took him to the cross, and also the great love of God, who offered himself voluntarily and even deliberately.